בבקשה.
Thank you very much. The topic that we have before us is, as Ambassador Baker put it, quite timely, not only because of the Palestinians and their very complicated internal political dynamics in which public opinion plays, I think, a significant part, but also because all around the region we see, quite suddenly, the eruption, if one wants to put it that way, of public opinion as an important, maybe even a decisive factor in the politics of various Arab countries. Public opinion is important as never before, and it's also measurable as never before. What does this population of almost 300,000 people actually think? Once respondents, we could tell, felt reasonably comfortable answering increasingly nosy questions, we came to the bottom line issue, which is, all right, if you had to choose, would you prefer to be a citizen of Israel or a citizen of a new Palestinian state? More of the Palestinians in East Jerusalem say that they would prefer to become citizens of Israel rather than citizens of a new Palestinian state. When we ask people whether they would move into Palestine, right, most of them said no. But when we ask people, these Palestinians in East Jerusalem, whether they would actually move in order to become a citizen of Israel if their existing neighborhood came under Palestinian rule, I think this is perhaps the most surprising, hard data point that we found in this survey. Fully 40% of the Palestinians in East Jerusalem said that they would actually probably or definitely move in order to live under Israeli rather than Palestinian rule if they had to make that choice. Why do these people feel that way? They're Palestinians, after all. Why would so many of them rather become Israeli rather than Palestinian citizens and even move to Israel in order to make that choice possible? Well, it turns out that exactly 44% of the Palestinians in the city say that they are very, or at least somewhat, satisfied with their standard of living. Almost half. It's a very high percentage compared to other populations in the Arab world that I've studied. We found, when we asked people about different identities, that the identity of being a blue card holder, in other words, their special status as East Jerusalem residents, not citizens of Israel, but with a lot of the privileges and benefits of work and travel and social benefits and so on. That identity as a blue card holder, incredibly, is almost as important to these people as their identity as a Palestinian or even as a Muslim. It's very important to these people that they have that special status. And that helps to explain why such a high percentage of them, if faced with the choice, would choose to be citizens of Israel and preserve that some special status and their access to education and employment and travel and social benefits. Now here comes a question that I think is particularly timely in view of the news just yesterday of the Hamas-Fatah so-called unity agreement, that people were concerned if they became a citizen of Palestine, and now we're talking to the entire sample, the total sample, no matter what their preference was. This population had a lot of significant concerns about losing employment in Israel, losing free movement in Israel, etc., losing Israeli health care. And now another, perhaps even more likely scenario, especially in view of what seems today, literally today, to be the Palestinian preference for a unilateral approach. If the Palestinians go ahead with their declared strategy for September, then what? And here I think there is good reason for the Palestinian Authority to think harder about where it's really going and what the effect on its own population is likely to be. Because only a third of the Palestinians, at least in East Jerusalem, only a third, a minority, say that a unilateral Palestinian independence, even one backed by the United Nations, would have a positive effect on their own lives. Two-thirds, in other words, say that such a unilateral step would be no more than an empty declaration and would not have a positive effect on their own lives. And if the Palestinians proceed down this path, as they seem intent on doing, it seems to me to be a possible recipe for trouble with their own population, not just with Israel or the international community,